Hey everyone, ever since my short review of Seven Thrones, I wanted to see what other Wings of Fire games were available on the platform. Yes, I've heard of the Wings of Fire beta, but today's focus will be on a relatively smaller game, Talons of Destiny. For those who don't know, Talons of Destiny is another Wings of Fire inspired Roblox game. Today I'll be playing through Talons of Destiny and talking about the different game systems, analyzing the good while critiquing what needs improvement. Although I'm not an active role player, I'll still give some feedback on things I noticed and have experienced. So without further ado, let's get started. Right off the bat, we get a very dark, albeit clean, main menu screen. I'm sure you've noticed the usual play buttons, but on the left we have an update log. I highly appreciate this feature in games. It definitely helps returning players to be informed about recent changes. I think most games should have an update log, so I give props to whoever greenlit and created this. I really appreciate it. Upon hitting play, we have the character creation screen, and oh my. These models look absolutely amazing. Whoever was in charge of making the models, you all did a fantastic job in making them look identical to the books. I especially like these models because if you were to create a silhouette, you can easily tell which tribe you're dealing with from a glance. No need to use colors or their abilities, their overall shape and design helps show which dragon you're dealing with. This is especially useful in roleplay scenarios, which is what this game is all about. The character creation is also quite in-depth. Having a paint tool really helps you create a more unique character design, which I imagine will be incredibly helpful for Rainwings. While I was designing my Nightwing, however, I couldn't find an undo feature. I don't know about others, but I tend to experiment with colors a lot when I care about making in-depth designs. There will be times where I won't like the color I'm working with, so I'll have to switch back to my previous option. I would have to try to find the right color, contrast and alpha, only to have it a few shades too light. Admittedly, this can be quite annoying. Additionally, there could be an instance where you accidentally click on the surface without meaning to. It doesn't feel too great when you've spent 5 to 10 minutes creating a masterpiece only to have it ruined by a misclick. An undo feature would definitely help mitigate that frustration when customizing your character. For me, I didn't notice any way to add accessories onto your character. When I first played this game, I thought that accessories or gear could be unlocked by just playing the game. Maybe you would find them in secret areas or get them from completing short quests. It would just be a bonus for exploring the world on your own volition. But after a while and examining other players, it was clear to me that accessories weren't really a feature in the game. It's not the biggest deal breaker in the world, but it would have been nice to be a small reward for adventurous players or those who supported the game by playing it for long hours. Now, after I created my own mediocre Nightwing, I continued into the world. You may have noticed that I put a name without hitting confirm name. So instead, my screen name was used instead of Amber. That's not a gameplay issue, it's just a skill issue. I genuinely forgot to click confirm name, so it's not the game's fault. Although maybe having the text light up after someone had input a name would be helpful in making sure that others don't make the same mistake. It would honestly be a good feature because the player's eyes are already drawn to the name box. Lighting up that option would definitely catch the player's attention, leading to less user error. Now onto the world itself. I was dropped onto the Summer Palace, which I thought was odd because I'm a Nightwing. I personally have no idea what determines who spawns where, but later in the recording I found a Sea Wing spawn out of nowhere just outside the palace. But I digress. The palace is absolutely amazing. This entire world is amazing. There's so many details in the interior, from all the foliage to the Sea Wing architecture. I simply can't imagine how difficult it was to model the palace's structure itself, considering that the entire area was covered by a mountain. It's even more impressive when there are several rooms to visit. I remember passing by the Sea Wing prisons, the royal kitchen, I would presume, and a giant coconut. I don't know the significance of this, but it must be a special coconut considering it's in the palace. I also did notice some crevices which had small rooms of food and green mats which seemed to be moss beds. Most of the props and rooms I saw were very canonical to Wings of Fire, which really adds to the roleplay experience. It's something that's very easy to miss, and I can imagine that roleplayers would be overjoyed at the attention to detail. Speaking of canon, when I was exploring the underwater channel leading out to the open world, I found myself in some breathing areas. I was nerding out over these because they were mentioned in the books. It may be a bit small to consider, but the level designers could have just made a continuous channel just with kelp. But no, they went the extra mile to include features that were in the novels. Now that I can appreciate. While I was exploring though, I didn't find many NPCs to talk to. It's possible that I may not have found them all because the only one I had seen was Queen Coral. It's fair to argue that non-player characters are not that essential, especially in a user-based roleplay environment, but I will say it does help fill the world with more life. Personally, I enjoyed the dialogue I had with Queen Coral talking about Anemone and her necklace from Lobster. It's short and sweet, so I can't complain about that, especially since the main focus was around the role-playing aspect of the game. Still, I can't help but think how lively the world would have been if there were more Sea Wings in the area. On a side note, I did find some crafty little crabs on the beach. They're very nice and don't pinch you when you come close. Overall, the crab serve is pretty good eye candy, and they're quite impressive as they have very subtle animations. Speaking of animations, they are astonishing. I had only played as a Nightwing for the session, but the flying, emotes, and poses were all very well animated. My personal favorite is the head dance, and that will always live rent-free in my head. The game gives you quite a few tools to show your emotion without having to type it out, which is quite handy for those immersive roleplay experiences. Now comes something I didn't really expect from a role-playing game: a decent UI and good accessibility. First of all, I have no idea what coins were for, nor did I find any of them in my playtest. But these 3 horizontal lines, they hold a very special menu which I just adore. It's none other than the game's control scheme. Now, you may be wondering, it's just the controls. And you may be right, but these buttons are customizable. That is rare to see in some games, and I am all for accessibility. It makes it so that if you don't like the current control scheme, you can change it. Let's say you don't like the head dance to be bound to the number 8, because then you'd have to stretch your finger. Just set it to the letter C and head dance all you want. It's such a good quality of life and accessibility option. It may not be recognized by many people, but I am in love with this. Now, the sound and graphics menu didn't work in my experience. I believe they weren't implemented because you could just change sound and graphics settings in the main menu, so that's completely fair. I will say though, having sliders for different sounds such as special effects, music, and main volume would have been good to implement. It's not a big issue though. And that has been my experience in Talons of Destiny. I didn't really engage in the role-playing because I'm highly nervous around new players. But I can clearly see that there are tools in this game to deliver a very immersive and exciting experience to Wings of Fire players. From the character customization to the world's overall quality, I can safely say that it's a fine game for role players who want to make stories in the Seawind Kingdom. Although there wasn't much life in the world, it's merely dwarfed by the fact that players are so active, but it still would have been nice to speak to some NPCs. The game has a lot of immersive content, and I encourage you to check out this game if you haven't already. And for my mobile players, I haven't tested the game out on my phone or iPad, so I can't be certain if you have the experience readily available. Anyways, that's all from me. What do you think about Talons of Destiny? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Subscribe for more content like this, and as always, thanks for listening.